Welcome, everyone, to the fifth episode of the Open Throne Podcast. I'm your host, Cole Houck, joined again by my good friend, CJ Brown, here to dissect the rest of the trade deadline, see people that were not traded, teams that did not make trades, and go over the winners and losers and overall thoughts of the trade deadline. So, immediately, we're going to jump right into this. As the people who were not traded, the first thing that comes to my mind is Ja Morant. I mean, I thought for sure that Ja was going to get traded once we saw Jaren Jackson was moved to the Jazz on the third. I didn't really see a world where they kept Ja, but looking at it in hindsight, he clearly did not have a market. I heard that the Miami Heat were trying to get a first round pick for Jaren Jackson Jr., which is crazy, Pat Riley. And then yeah, he'd been there, had been doing Ja Morant things. He actually had a couple really great games, and they still are in the position they're in with the top 10 pick. So if you don't need to trade him, it does kind of make sense the more I think about it to not get rid of him. But if you told me that they were not going to trade him immediately after the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, I would have said you were crazy. I mean, what were your thoughts about him not being moved?
Well, first, I just want to say I didn't hear about that Heat thing. So they were expecting a first round pick also. That's
Let me
insane.
clarify. It was some team that was interested. I
Okay.
just really am certain that it's Pat Riley because he's Pat Riley.
Yeah, that's really funny though. But no, I after I saw the trade, I thought they might be able to trade him, but I don't think he necessarily had to be traded. I don't think I know there's a lot of discussion about whether or not he wanted to be traded or not. I don't think he wanted to be traded, in my specific opinion. But I do think that if you can still get that good pick, I think you save him for the offseason and then maybe try and do another trade. Maybe because after the Trey Young trade, I think everyone was just expecting to get John Morant for scraps. And like I said, I wouldn't trade John Morant for scraps. I don't think it would benefit them at all, especially if they could still get a top pick with him. I don't think there's any reason for them to try and just force something and get him for like a Simone Fontecchio or something. If you're gonna get nothing at all, you might as well keep the player. And I think I like John the Grizzlies, and I think he can raise his value. So I think they made the right choice not trading him.
I do too. I wasn't thinking that, going into today, but the more I think about it, the more we talk about it, I think that makes sense, especially if they move up in the draft and get one of these awesome two guards like AJ DeBancer or somebody, pair him in the backcourt with John Morant. I think there's a really good chance that team is a lot better. So it depends on what the draft pick turns into and who they decide to take and how he looks, fit wise next with John Morant, because you kind of have to have specific players around John Morant's lack of shooting, drive heavy play style that he has, lack of defense sometimes, especially come playoff settings. So there's problems there, but I understand like his value should not have been as low as it was. It's the market, and clearly the market was very hurt from the Trey Young trade as far as that archetype of a player, I guess, as far as like teams and salary and how much of salary cap they make up. So I think that makes sense too. The next guy is Michael Porter Jr. I thought for sure this guy was going to get moved out. Obviously, there's a lot of hype around him getting moved too. I just don't really see a world where the Nets would want to keep Michael Porter Jr. Obviously, they're still fairly bad without him, so it isn't hurting the draft stock necessarily a ton either, which is maybe the argument for it. But they traded, was it Cam Johnson for him? I don't remember if they had I think they also got a pick to get Cam Johnson over there. So they already got one pick out of Michael Porter Jr., that's nice, good for the Nets. I feel like they could have multiplied that on top of a couple more picks. Maybe not this, draft or trade deadline saga, but maybe in the next one or the offseason. So I was a little surprised they didn't do that now. I feel like there's a lot of teams that need shooting, like a Michael Porter Jr. I talk about the Pistons getting him, just teams that need shooting. He could really be useful for. He's shown he can be a third or fourth option on a playoff team. I thought somebody would come call on Brooklyn, and maybe they did, but obviously the deal didn't get made. What were your thoughts on Michael Porter Jr. staying over there?
I actually didn't want him to be traded. I think if anything, you could always trade him next year, but I think he's playing a very pivotal role in the development of the Nets players right now. There's something so valuable about having a player as good as Michael Porter Jr. who doesn't demand the ball. So I think he's helping with Yegor Demon's development a lot. I think overall, the way the team plays, they kind of need him to score points, and I'm guessing the person that they trade him for would not be doing the same thing. And the fact that they can still have him, he's someone who's won a championship. I think he provides benefits to this Nets team other than just like as trade value. So I'm actually happy they didn't trade him, especially since how much Michael Porter Jr. likes it there. And how much he's and the Brooklyn fans. I think Brooklyn fans need a player to who love Brooklyn, and so I'm not expecting them to keep him forever. But I do think there's nothing that'll happen between this season and next season that should lower his value. So I would rather just help the development of the young guards that they have, the tons of young guards that they have, and the young centers that they have. They just have overall young players. So I feel like Michael Porter Jr. is probably helping a lot with that, and that's why they decided to keep him.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good take. I mean, I understand why you'd want to keep him around as far as he isn't stunning the development and actually maybe helping by getting them, being a catch and shoot guy that can play next to somebody like you or Demon. That's a really good example. I think that makes a lot of sense to keep those players around and get them a guy that can take those shots and get it's not super high usage. Obviously, his usage is higher. He's passed more than he's used to, but it's a different role, and they need somebody like that on that team, or else it's going to be a bunch of young guys that don't know what they're doing. Similar enough to like what the Houston Rockets were in the early 2020s before they got Ime, or what the Wizards are doing up until last year or the year before that, where it's just kind of a bunch of young guys and hope we'd figure this stuff out eventually. I think it makes sense to want somebody like a Michael Porter Jr. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but that's a pretty good take. I respect
Yes.
that. And then the next was Laurie Markkinen. Now, I thought Laura was going to get traded for sure going into it. Kind of a similar enough thing to Michael Porter Jr. We had talked about that before, where it's a tall shooter, somebody that is very much so used off ball, really is only a catch and shoot guy, a play finisher, right? That's what I like to say for those types of guys, MPJ and Markkinen. And that'd be really useful on a team. I'm gonna keep going back to the Pistons, teams that don't shoot. We could could use that. The Raptors could use one of those two guys probably shooting height. We need something like that as well. There were plenty of teams that need that archetype of guy. But then they traded for Jaren Jackson Jr. And I thought, okay, it makes sense. Well, kind of makes sense. Again, I'm still kind of up in the air, but I get the picture now a little bit better. Also, to come on the podcast and say that they were going to use Laurie in a piece to get a bigger player, a better, bigger star, higher usage star. And I think that was really interesting. That didn't happen. Did you ever see that being a possibility, like he said, or are you surprised that he didn't get moved?
I really thought he was gonna get moved. As you know, we're in the same fantasy league. I didn't trade for Laurie Markkinen because I was like, no, he's definitely going to a team where he'll have a smaller role. So I was very much expecting him on the Pistons. And like I said, I think the Keontae George jump really helped because if you would have told me a year ago that Keontae George was almost putting up all-star numbers, I wouldn't believe you because I thought Keontae George was a very bad shot taker and not really a shot maker. And now that the shots are going in and he's actually like playmaking a lot better now, I think they can do something. He can do something with Laurie. There's something there. And now that they have JJJ, it just works.
Yeah, they he was very bad.
He
Keontae
was.
George was. His first year or maybe 2 years in the league was just like he's still very bad at defense. He's one of the worst defensive guards I'd say in the league. So when the shots aren't falling, he's taking dumb shots, he's not passing as much. It's like, God, what can this guy give you? I think you may have, it was either you or Austin. Somebody said it's reminiscent to Darius Garland when he was in his early days,
Yeah.
where it's like Darius Garland just doesn't really provide a ton when he's not not hitting his shots. It's like, well, what does he do? He doesn't really pass as much when he was younger. Takes weird shots sometimes. They don't go in. Doesn't is not a positive on defense. Not as bad as Keontae, but the point still stands. It's it was tricky. It was tricky. That guy was in a tough spot. So I'm really happy he's making a step to start hitting his shots, start looking a lot better this year. He's been battling some injuries recently. I doubt he's going to play much for the rest of the season. He didn't play for 4 games, then was out. I think he played 13 minutes last night. So he won't play much, but it'll be interesting to see what they look like next year. Hopefully, he still keeps up the offensive production he has with the guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. that can kind of make up for if he gets blown past on the perimeter. You got somebody who can kind of help side block or just go straight up contest, hopefully without fouling. He's got a problem with that, but Jaren Jackson Jr. provides that a lot, so that should be good. Yeah, I thought Laurie was gonna get moved. I felt pretty certain about it until the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, and then I thought it was pretty certain they were just gonna stick with that, see what it looks like in next year, 2027, and that looks like what they're doing. The next two, I don't have players. I have two teams, and these two teams are really, really bothering me. So these two teams are the Kings and the Pelicans. The Kings and the Pelicans did not make trades. Now, the Kings did make a trade. They didn't make a trade around the deadline, but they made one a few days, about a week or so before, a few days before, where they got DeAndre Hunter for Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis. And I just cannot, I still, a week later cannot make sense of that trade. I don't know why they got DeAndre Hunter. He's was like a problem, almost a problem in Cleveland's, and they decided to not make any other moves. There was talks of Sabonis going to the Raptors, and I didn't like the idea at first. I kind of warmed to it a little bit just because we were so desperate for a big, and a playmaking big would be okay in our system. That's kind of a trade, something for a different day. But they had, DeRozan could go to a better team. Levine could be used. He's very expensive. I mean, very, very expensive. They probably, maybe they need to attach draft capital. They didn't want to do that. But Levine could be used on a team, just the shooting ability. Um, they traded away their one and a half, because Schroeder's kind of a half asset, and Keon Ellis away for nothing, essentially, and then decided to rest on the rest of their stuff while having the worst record in the NBA in vets and being on a pretty high, salary. They pay their players a lot. They're on one of the higher paid salaries of the league. And then the Pelicans, it is a totally different story, but the Pelicans need to fix their management. I don't know what they were doing trading that pick. It's looked upon as one of the worst deals in recent history as well, and it should be. Shout out to Derek Queen. He's been fantastic. I'm really happy that he's getting good runs and has played so well. It makes the trade not look nearly as bad as it is, it is and probably should have been. They have problems over there. Trey Murphy should have been traded. Zion should have been traded a few years ago. Easy to say in hindsight. I'm not, it's tough to say, like, now looking back, they should have done this, this, and this. Everybody knew Trey Murphy should have been traded, or most people did. Zion has his concerns and has been in trade talks for a couple years now, at least within the last year or so, but obviously his value has tanked a little bit. Herb Jones could go teams would give up multiple firsts. Teams would give up at least a first for Herb Jones, maybe even multiple if there's, solid protections on it. They have Yves Missi. I heard maybe would go into the Raptors as well, but they wanted a first too. So they were asking too much because they believe in their core, this same core that has never been healthy for years, ever since Zion has been there. And they said it was the coach's fault, but they got rid of the coach and got rid of the management, put a new coach, new management in there, and they still have one of the worst records in the league. So I don't like what they're doing over there and in New Orleans. You can't tell. It's been bothering me a lot. I really wanted a couple of those guys on the Raptors, and they sat on it and did not do anything. The Raptors and the Pelicans, especially the Pelicans. What are your thoughts about the Kings and the Pelicans trade deadline?
Well, I would just like to say that I don't put the Pelicans on the same level of the Kings. I think the Kings are much worse. I think their issue is much worse. I think they watched the Chicago Bulls have multiple untradeable contracts and traded for all of them. I think they are everything wrong. I think there's nothing their front office does well. I think that Keon Ellis, I'm pretty sure at one point was wanted by the Lakers, and the Lakers would have given up draft capital, and then they ended up giving up Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder for nothing, basically, because DeAndre Hunter was not as good as I thought he was going to be with the Cavs. He was actually bad. So they basically, that was a negative asset for them. They gained nothing from that. They have DeMar DeRozan is untradeable. They have Zach LaVine, who I feel is untradeable. They have DeMontis Sabonis, who I feel is untradeable. And I think they're only in that position because of their poorly run office. I think they could have gotten Malik Monk away. I know the Timberwolves they were talked about the Timberwolves getting Malik Monk, and they weren't able to get anything from that. It's just, there's so much wrong with them. And they have really good players who don't get a lot of minutes because of all the vets on their team, right? So like Anik Clifford, who I think is someone who can be good. I've talked positive about Devin Carter before.
He
Like,
went out. Nick Clifford went out for 30 yesterday, by the way.
yeah. And this is somebody who you have sitting behind DeMar, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan. Like, I cannot stand the Kings in their front office, but I don't think it's possible to compare the Kings to the Pelicans in that
Hey, but the,
regard.
King, the Kings are giving up their unprotected first round pick for end of lottery guy. I mean,
Yeah, but I think, like I said, I think they made the choice that gave them their future star. So I'm not mad about that. I think the fact that they did it, uh, whether or not, if they believe that the only way they could have done it was to get Derek Queen, then I'm not mad at them for that because they correctly predicted how good Derek Queen would be. I haven't seen the Kings do anything like that in the draft. So I would still give them more the benefit of the doubt. Um, but like I said, with the Pelicans, I'm a big fan of Trey Murphy. I think that they can do something with him. I actually don't want them to trade Trey Murphy. I would prefer they trade Zion. But, I also think there's the Pelicans. I think the Pelicans are a lot like the Hornets in a way where I'm like, I feel like the roster is better than like what the results are. And now it's showing like with the Hornets because I would always talk about with one of my best friends. He's a Hornets fan. Why I can't tell why the Hornets aren't good because their roster is good. And now we're seeing sometimes you just need to click. But the Hornets, it really took like a good vet signing and like Colin Sexton and then a really good coach. Charles Lee is like coaching his butt off over there. So I don't know what the Pelicans need. I think they can. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say they'd be a playoff team like they said. They said they are a playoff team. But I definitely think if they were in the East, we wouldn't have the same conversations about them. It's only that the West is so strong that we kind of look at the Pelicans like a failure of an organization. But I do definitely think they should probably trade Herb Jones now. They should have traded him. I don't know what his value was, but he could have got them a first round pick at the minimum. I like a lot of players on their roster. I like Yves Missy. You know, we don't have to talk about him, but I thought the Jordan Poole pickup would help. It didn't much. I'm really hoping Jordan Poole recovers as a player from the punch, but
I think DeJounte Murray's still on that roster too. I hadn't thought
he
about
is,
him in
and
a long
he's
time.
been out. So maybe they think when he comes back, they'll have a bigger punch. But I I don't know. I don't but I do wanna definitely say that I don't compare them to the Kings on the level of, like, incompetency.
Well, first off, your take about at least the Pelicans, even if they made the worst trade, Luke is the worst trade, but one of the worst trades in recent history. At least they can spot the talent of Derek Queen. That's funny and true. I can't say anything about that. I don't remember the last time the Kings picked up a Derek Queen in the draft. So I think that's a good point there. But I've been saying they are the Hornets of the West for a long time as well. Like they need a new coach. They need a couple more healthy players, and they need a new training, like medical staff over there so badly.
So
Them
bad.
two are the two most injury prone teams consistently. And some of his players, but do you remember when Dice Daniels went to Atlanta and then like
Yeah,
a week after being there, he was like, "Man, there's something in the water over there. Like I keep getting injured." It's just they got problems over there that
he
that
was right.
need fixing, and clearly that GM over there is not the guy to do it. I got a lot of love for a lot of players over there. I like Yves Missy a lot from Baylor. Trey Murphy went to school in Cary right around here, so that was really cool to find out and cheer for him. He's a great shooter. He hit like 12 against the Bucks, I think, the other night, right, something like that. So that was really fun to watch. But I think we could use him on the Raptors, and I think that organization does not know what they're doing clearly. So the other teams we have here, the next teams, I'm not sure how to describe it. I guess I would say the teams that didn't make trades to get better by adding assets, because you have a couple teams on here that took away assets or let people go and maybe got better, but they didn't go out of their way to really improve. The first team of that, actually, I'll just listen now, is the Magic, the Sixers, the Miami Heat, the Spurs, the Denver Nuggets, the Houston Rockets, the Phoenix Suns, and the Trailblazers. So, of those teams, which one of those stick out to you as not needing to do anything more than the rest of them, or a couple, and the teams that needed to do stuff and sat on their hands and didn't?
I'll start with the teams that I felt needed to do something. The Rockets. I think they really needed a point guard. Um, Kevin Durant is my favorite player, so I've watched every Rockets game this year, and man, they need a real point guard. I really wanted them to go for Kobe White, and I saw that the asking price was Tari Eason, and that's why that trade didn't go through. And I get it. I wouldn't want to trade Tari Eason either, but I'm very disappointed that they weren't able to get any point guard. Like, I don't know why they couldn't have gotten an IO for less than Tari Eason or something like that. But the fact that they weren't able to get one makes me think, well, now that I know Fred VanVleet might come back early in the playoffs, like that's something that they've been talking about, then maybe it's not that bad that they didn't do a trade. But I really think they probably should have gotten at least one guard, or at least gotten like a Chris Paul or someone who you feel comfortable with to not turn over the ball in the fourth quarter. But there was something. I know the Heat is another team that I like. I don't know what trade they would do, so it's tough for me to say it. But I really I think the Heat need to decide what they want to do. You know, they're obviously not trying to rebuild, or else they wouldn't treat Khalil Ware the way they are doing right now, and how he's getting a lot of disrespect from the GM and the coach. And I'm just like, are y'all trying? Is he your future or is he not? Because I feel like he's your future. And if he is, then maybe you shouldn't be treating the way you're treating him. But I think a lot of people know the Heat as a team that's like the 8 seed that always does good in the playoffs. So I would like to have seen them do something. A team that I didn't really think needed to do anything, the Suns. They did a tiny trade. They got Cole Anthony, and they got I'm blanking. Um, but they
Two bucks, got they got Amir Coffee.
yeah, Amir Coffey. Yeah, I don't know why I'm blanking on it, but I think that they didn't really need to do much. I'm really liking their team this year. Um, they kind of just did a trade that kind of gives them a backups if anything, if any injuries happen. And I think that they didn't need to because they're really good right now. And Jalen Green has barely played. So I don't think he's like their savior or anything, but he has gotten hurt in both the games he's played in. But I do think that they don't really need to make any crazy changes. Another team I would say is the Trailblazers. I also like where they're going. I don't think they need to rush anything. Denny is, playing how Denny is playing. I think Klingon is really good. Their whole lineup is good, like a bunch of good players. So I don't see the need for them to try and force anything with the trade deadline. They had no need to.
That's fair. I feel that same way about the Blazers as well. I like where they're going. I mean, obviously they were throwing a bone, like a weird situation at the beginning of the year with the whole Chauncey Billups, like spy gambling, whatever you want to, the poker table. There's a lot going on over there. But they put in, is it Tiago Splitter, right? That's the
Mhm.
coach over there now, right? So they got him going since the second game or the first game of the year, and they've been up and down. I think they lost a lot of games in a row, but they won last night. And I really like. I've been on here saying I like what they do a lot. I think it makes sense for them not to do anything. The Suns, on the other hand, I mean, maybe it makes sense for them not to do anything, but I had been kind of hoping and manifesting that they would do something because, granted, that front office has been a lot better since the first few mistakes that they made, really quickly as soon as they got like Matt Ishbia and all those guys when they came in, made a couple dumb trades, Bradley Beal thing, all of the whole saga over there. I was hoping that they would do something like kind of fun, maybe stupid, maybe high upside, like take a risk, and that would be kind of like a big swing. They would go get a John Morant. I'd put them for a John Morant, and maybe them also getting Zion, grasping for stuff with Zion because Zion wouldn't go to many teams. So I was thinking maybe the Suns could include him as well. They didn't do anything. Now, granted, again, they don't really need to do anything. They were succeeding without Jalen Green. They have had a lot of success. I'm happy for him as well. Happy for Dylan Brooks especially. I was happy for him to be better and be on a winning team. I was just hoping they would do something, and they didn't. So that was kind of underwhelmed as like a personal fan. That's not necessarily like a better or worse for the team. The Heat, on the other hand, is a whole other thing. And I'll probably do a podcast with my Heat guy pretty soon talking about the whole Pat Riley situation and what the direction or lack of a direction for this team,
Yeah.
what that looks like. So it's just they should have done something. They should have gone. They were in talks for John Morant and Giannis, man. I saw somewhere that said they wanted to get, I think it was Giannis and Ja without giving up. They were willing to give up Hero. So it was without giving up Bam and Norman Powell. Like there was a chance that they got both of those guys without giving up those two. Like that's just so greedy out loud. All of it just screams like greed and Pat Riley. And this is why they're directionless and have nothing to go with this team still being the king of the play-in like they have been for however many years in a row, even without Jimmy Butler. So I don't like what's going on over there. As far as direction and the lack of making moves, asking for too much, that sort of thing. I think the Spurs, I think you said the Spurs is a good team that didn't need to do anything as well.
Mhm.
We mentioned them. They're a team that I like where they're at. I think it makes sense to keep going. Eventually, I'm manifesting like a log jam out of the guards that they have, and they need to get value out of one of those guards and replace somebody like a Harrison Barnes next to Wimby and get like a better forward. Maybe that means Keldon Johnson and I don't know, one of their really good young guards. It's gonna suck to say goodbye to one of those guys. I just don't know that they can all play together, and I think it makes sense to because you'll get good production out of Fox and Harper. One other player I can't remember. Oh, Stephon Castle too. Like
Mhm.
all three of those guys are really good guards, and I'm not sure you're gonna be able to play all of them together next to Wimby. In a couple years, I think it's gonna be better for the team to replace one of those guys and go get a better forward instead because they already have a lot of good guards. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to stay where they are right now. As well, they're second seed or third seed in the West right now, and that was not didn't expect them to be that good. So shout out to them for that. One team I think should have done something is like the Rockets, like you said. I think the Rockets should have gotten to get a point guard. I'm not sure I would have held on to Tari Eason. I know you're a huge Tari Eason fan, so I'm not going to, try and convince you against it. But I don't know that. I think the dynamic of the team needs a point guard much more than they need a Tari Eason, even if he is shooting, 50% from threes or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of a weird move. But overall, a lot of these teams, besides the rant I had about the Kings and the Pelicans, I think it kind of makes sense why they didn't make trades. I don't love it for the Magic. Now that I'm thinking about it out loud, I feel like the Magic needed to do something. This is a whole other topic too. The East this year is so much worse than the East will be next year. Now, if you're the GMs of the East and you're thinking it doesn't matter if we make a good splash to be the king of the East, make it to the finals, we'll still get thrown around by 3 or 4 teams out west, then that's fine to have that thought. But if I was a team like the Magic or the 76ers, I'm not sure I'd be thinking like that, or the Pistons. I would be thinking we need to go right now. We haven't seen a finals appearance in so many years. We could have done what the Pacers did last year. That's so good for jersey sales. It's so good for fans, all that stuff. It's a really great move for the franchise, even if it doesn't get you over the top of the Thunder or the Spurs or the Nuggets or the Rockets potentially. Could get you in a situation where you might be able to take them to 6 or 7 like the Pacers did last year, and they didn't do that. The Magic, the Knicks a little bit didn't do that. I said the Sixers already. The Pistons, they did what they needed to. We'll talk about the Pistons later. Um, yeah, they needed a couple teams need to do this, and I think the biggest example is the Magic, where it's just I am so not okay with I'm not content with the middle ground that they put themselves in. Everybody thought they were going to be better. They traded 5 picks, 5 first round picks, get Desmond Bain. They're still in the play-in, right? It's just I don't know. Jamal Mosley may not be coaching pretty soon. They needed to make a splash, I feel like, and they did not. So I'm disappointed in that.
Yeah, and to add on to that, Jamal Mosley shouldn't be coaching, unfortunately. I did like him as a coach, but
I liked them too. I liked them
this
a
is
couple years
insane.
ago.
This is not I guess this isn't the type of team for him to be coaching. But in their defense of why they didn't make a trade, I feel like I also agree it probably would have been too soon after the Desmond Bain trade to now try and trade even more of your assets for another thing when this thing you already have, Desmond Bain, Franz Wagner, and Paolo, is not really working. Like I feel like they would be putting themselves too much into a ditch that is already like you're like, maybe we
It's
have to
already dug
trade
up pretty deep in there.
yeah, it
Yeah.
would put you too deep in a hole, I feel like, because if they ever wanted to retool around either Franz or Paolo, and you already have given up all those assets because you were trying to make the 3 of them work, and in my opinion, they don't work at all, unfortunately, when I really thought they would. So I'm not trying to be a hypocrite when I say, like, I thought it was gonna work. It doesn't. So I think that's more what the thought process is, like, we'll see how these playoffs go, and then we'll decide on Bane, Paolo, and Franz, probably Paolo and Franz.
I think that's a really good point. And you're probably right about them not needing to make a trade, not keep digging down a little bit deeper and putting, giving up more future assets that they have, what they have left after the Desmond Bain trade. It's more so just what they stand for in the Miami Heat as well, in the sense of like, this is the year to go for it in the East. Tatum will be back. Hallie will be back. The Wizards look to be pretty good next year as well. Like nobody's getting worse and everybody's getting better. So this is the time to do it right now. And a lot of teams did not do it except for the Cavs and kind of the Pistons. So
Yeah,
that's all it is. You make a good point though. It's like you don't want to keep making it worse. You've already done the issue potentially with trading so many picks for Desmond Bain and it isn't working right now. Go get a new coach, see how it works in the playoffs like you said, and maybe it'll be better next year. But it's just disappointing for this year as bad as the East is
I
my
get that.
opinion. So now we're gonna get to the winners and losers. My first winner is the Wizards, and I was not ready to say that at all going into this deadline. I mean, or not even deadline, but before they traded for Trey Young, I didn't think the Wizards would be in the running for Trey Young, and much less Anthony Davis, like you had said in the last podcast. So I'm all here for it. I think I just for hope and watching a Wizards game as a more casual fan maybe would. I'm really excited for that. They'll sell a bunch of jerseys. That'll be really good to just finally have hope for a winning program. Now you still have so many injury concerns with Anthony Davis, with Trey Young, with the young guys over there, but I think it's good, and I'm excited to see what it looks like. I also have the Cavs as a winner. Like I said before, they were kind of the one team in the East that decided to go all in, more not all in, but more in than the rest of them have to make a win now move, like the James Harden and getting the pieces on the bench like Schroeder and Keon Ellis. I like what they did a lot. I think it'll be fun to watch for the rest of the season, and I'm really curious. Like I think they have a pretty good chance to make the Eastern Conference Finals and maybe the finals as well, depending on what the matchups look like. And then I also have the Pacers. And not as much as a winner as the other two, but I think the Pacers are putting themselves in a good position for next year, bringing in Zubac, still having a good roster, and hoping that everything will kind of work itself out around Hallie like it did in the previous year. So I think they put themselves in a good spot. I think the Zubac trade is really good for them, and I'm excited to see what they look like going forward.
I get that. I get that. And all those 3 I would also consider them winners. I wanna add in the Thunder. I know a lot of people are iffy about this one. I think this is the best trade, um, for what was already what I consider to be the championship team, that they got even better with their biggest weakness, which is shot creations. And not only that, but Jared McCain, I feel like is slightly underrated as a playmaker. And I think it just works in a team that I already thought had one of the best benches as an even better bench. I think that trade was amazing for them. And they didn't really give anything of value considering they have still probably like what 13, 14 first round picks. So they didn't even have to give up on a first round pick. They just give 3 seconds. Um, Another one I'd say is the Clippers. Now this is probably a weird one. This is one I personally think just because I'm big on Benedict Mathurin. I'm big on the fact that they have a possibility of getting a pick 6 through 10. And I think it's very likely that the pick falls there, um, between 6 and 10. So the odds of them getting it just having a chance at a top 10 pick this year is excellent. So I would consider them a winner for that. The Timberwolves getting Io. I really do think they were a team that just needed a move around the edges, and they did. He's a great guard. He fits the Timberwolves like style of play really well, I think. And he's one of the players who you can just put in a spot, and I think they'll do well depending on what his role is with that team. And of course, there's a team that he doesn't need to do much. He's not because they already have Dante, who kind of plays his faux point guard that he does, even though I really think he's a two. And they still have Mike Conley, who can help Io with his passing, how he can improve his way to play with Gobert, because I know Mike Conley and Gobert really play well together. So he can hopefully you can use his vet presence to improve Io's playmaking. And then also the Hornets. I do think I would consider them a winner. As much as I loved Colin Sexton, I think Kobe White is better objectively than Colin Sexton. And if Charles Lee can make it work, this team is a real playoff team, a real one.
I'm so happy to be hearing that, man. I mean, the Hornets is a real play-in team or playoff team, excuse me. They are a real play-in team as of right now.
Yeah.
I think it's great to be able to say that. I mean, just seriously, it's so great for all the Hornets guys around here just to be close to them and cheering for them. They've had very rough go at last few years. I mean, since Kimba, I mean, what is the peak? You know, when they made the play-in and lost by
Yes.
20, like
That would be the
5 years
peak.
ago. That's tough. That's not very good out loud. So I'm happy for them. I have them as a partial winner. As in, I think they are. I explained in the last podcast where I feel like Kobe White would make them better, but it may hurt them right now, and that's I'm worried about right now because there's not a ton of season left, and they've won 9 or 10 games in a row to get to just barely in the play in. And if it does hurt them a lot now, they may not make the play in at all. And then now we're looking at this like this is awful. We had one good stretch as a Hornets the last 10 years, and we traded for Kobe White, and we got out of that situation. Not that it will happen. I think that's pretty unlikely, but I think it's a possibility, and I just want to address that and say if that happens, that's terrible. That's really bad for this Hornets franchise that we're so happy and so high on. I think the Timberwolves is a great winner. I should have said them as well. I think getting Io really does make this team more fun. I think it's gonna be interesting to see what they look like in the postseason. We talked about that earlier too. My other partial winner is the Atlanta Hawks, just because they need shooting, and KP was so up in the air with his health that I think bringing Buddy Hield over to that team and seeing what Kuminga will look like, I still think he'll get pretty deep in the bench and won't get a ton of run. But I'm happy to see what he looks like on a different system, new team, and Buddy will be really good for this team. I'm pretty high on Buddy Hield as far as being able to shoot. Still very streaky. I know we talked about that a few times, but really I like Buddy a lot and hope that he does pretty good in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So now is the point where we talk about the losers. No, this is the teams that I think didn't do much or lost what they did. I still have the Pelicans and the Kings on here. I've already talked about them plenty today. I have the Heat on here too. It's more of the same. Exactly right. The Sixers as well. I just, giving up Jared McCain. We had talked about that where it is I understand to an extent. Maybe they should be a partial loser. I understand why they gave up on him because they wanted to sign Dominic Barlow. That's also why they got rid of Eric Gordon. Dominic Barlow is a really good forward. I like him a lot. It makes sense for him to get an NBA contract. And they want to be able to re-sign Quentin Grimes, right? Like they signed him really cheap last year. And I think Quentin Grimes on a real contract, whatever that looks like, depending on how much they get, could be really good. I just think they should have gone up for more, like the Heat and the Magic. This is the year to go for it,
Mhm.
potentially. I don't know how much longer you got of Joel Embiid. Maxi's still great. Yeah, a bunch of good things going on in this team, especially, they're probably the 4th seed right now. They're battling up in the East, and this is the time they could make a splash and make a finals. We've been talking about that for so long with Joel Embiid. This is one of their best chances as far as the East being this week, you know? And yet what they did at the trade deadline was get rid of Jared McCain. That's their big move, They're literally getting worse. So It's tough. It's not a good look. It's not the worst thing. I know why they did it, like I explained with the signing Barlow and getting Quentin Grimes in free agency, but it's not happy with it. And then the Brooklyn Nets, I have my as my last full loser because I think they should have gone traded more people. Like I was already talking about Michael Porter Jr. There was news about Day'Ron Sharp going to the Raptors, which I would have been pretty happy with. We needed bigs. We got Trace Jackson Davis from the Warriors, but he's a much smaller role, less usage than somebody like a Day'Ron Sharp would have been. But they were asking for a first, so we didn't give that up. There's just a couple pieces on that team that I wish they would have traded, and they did not. So that it still is hampering how many rookies they have a little bit. I liked your point earlier about, MPJ being good for those rookies, but at the same time, they don't need a lot of those guys out there. They probably need some of them, but it makes sense to use those get assets for what you have, and they didn't do that. So I was disappointed about that as a Raptors fan. I wanted Day'Ron Sharp, and as a fan of the NBA, I think they could have sold a little bit more, gotten worse, and contenders could have got players like Day'Ron Sharp.
Mhm. Yep, I would agree. I think I'd say the biggest loser is probably the Kings, um, as we've talked about before. But like I also said, I'm also not mad because I think those contracts are untradeable. I don't know how. I mean, you would almost have to give up assets to get rid of them, which
They
is
put
why
themselves in
it's
that
hard for me to
situation in the
talk
first
about them.
place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think they're big losers. I think the Heat are big losers, especially chemistry wise, because I feel like they have a really good team, and I think they were almost too bought into the Giannis sweepstakes, even though they weren't really willing to give up the assets for Giannis. I think those are my losers. I think a lot of teams were like, I don't really think there was a lot of huge losers. There was no really trades where I was other than I think the Keon Ellis, Dennis Schroeder, but that wasn't really at the trade deadline. That was a little before. But I think most teams I'm pretty okay with where they're at right now, other than those two.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I said I also have partial losers, John Morant and the Magic. We had talked about John Morant not getting traded at the beginning of this, and I talked about the Magic being in the same situation as the Heat and a couple of those Eastern Conference teams where I just would have liked them to do more, but I understand to your point why they didn't. Not a ton of losers. That's a pretty good point about this. But there's not a ton of losers because I heard somebody say that not a ton of teams went all in either. I mean, the biggest splashes we
Mhm.
saw this trade deadline was the Wizards and the Jazz. Both those teams have less than 16 wins right now.
I'd say the Cavs
No.
also went all in
Well, yes, that's true, that's true. But
because
I
they went
think
on an
I
aging
think
star.
yeah, yeah, that's definitely a good point. But I meant more so as in like trading future capital or future draft capital and assets. Darius Garland is a future, but it in the sense of upgrading what is very little right now to win now and like the future assets. Darius Garland is about the same caliber player as Harden is. He's just much younger, so it seems like it's going all in a
Yeah.
sense. There's only one team, I think it was, that traded a first round pick. I don't remember who it was, but one team that had a above 500 record that traded a first round pick to go in. Very few teams actually went all in this year. And again, it was just those two teams that are looking to go in next year, which is hilarious looking at it with the East Conference that we have this year. So, very interesting trade deadline. Not at all what I was expecting. I mean, I'm really excited to see what a lot of these situations look like with the new teams, new players going. A couple teams may make the next step. I'm really curious what the East will look like. I think the Cavs have a pretty good chance. Just overall happy. I will say I thought that there was going to be more happening on the final day of the trade deadline
Mhm.
because of how much was going on. I thought Ja was going to get traded. I thought Giannis was going to get traded. I had this is a pipe dream, so don't judge me too hardly for this, anybody listening. But I heard that LeBron and the Lakers had acknowledged that they're going to move forward, separately, going, at some point pretty soon. So I thought it was really odd timing to be saying that 2 days before the deadline. I thought there was a chance that LeBron might get traded, I don't know, to the Warriors or somebody, or back to Cleveland is what I'm hearing too. So it's just I thought a lot more big names were going to get traded. I was very happy with what we got. You don't want to seem too greedy for getting the big trades in the 4th and the 3rd of February, but just a little bit underwhelmed by the deadline day. And some of that might be because I'm a Raptors fan and they didn't do a whole lot either.
No, I definitely get that. I think I had the expectation that this was gonna be a bad trade deadline, and so much stuff happened that I could not have ever predicted. So I think it was actually a pretty good deadline in my opinion. It's not one of the craziest ever, of course, we've had some crazy deadlines, but I think this one is something it's memorable. It's not as bad. Everyone was saying this was gonna be one of the worst deadlines. Everyone was worried. Everything was locked up because of the possible Giannis trades. And then after the Trey Young trade happened, everyone thought, like, picks were at an all-time low and everyone's value might be low. So everyone was scared of trading, being the next team to trade. But I think it ended up being pretty enjoyable.
I definitely agree with that. And I also think this offseason will be pretty exciting as well. I think there'll be more trades to come in the offseason, whether it be Giannis, we'll talk about that another time, whether it be somebody like a John Morant or even LeBron, players that we're not even thinking of as well could get traded between, this end of this year and next season. So that's something to look forward to as well. Well, that's all we have for today's episode. Thanks again for listening to the 5th episode of the Open Throne Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Cole Houck. Had CJ on today. And please sure to like and subscribe on the podcast. We'll see you around next time.